First step, this is A. This is A. I'm going to take off B right now so that I have space. So does everybody see this question that I'm working on? It's part A. All right, so step number 1, if we think about, what was our first step? What did I do? What do you do first? Solve x for t. So I'm going to take my x equals negative 3t. And in order to solve that for t, what do I need to do? Yep, divide both sides by negative 3. So what you get is t equals, and you can write that like this, as x over negative 3, or you can write it as negative 1/3 times x. That's the same thing. Because when you divide by 3, you're multiplying by 1/3. And then what was step 2? Substitute it in for y. So I'm going to take that and I'm going to substitute it where I have a t in my y parameter. So y equals, and then it's t squared plus 2. So inside of the parentheses, I'm going to drop in x over negative 3. I'll use the first one. And then we need to simplify it. So what is x over negative 3 times x over negative 3? What does that give you? So, wait, let me write it. Let me write it off to the side. You have x over negative 3 times x over negative 3. If you multiply across, what do you get on the top? X squared, and at the bottom, you should get a 9. This would be your equation. Or you could write it like this. So either one of these will work. Now, the last thing we need to do is talk about domain. When we started out, did we have a red light? Remember, our 2 red lights are x is in the denominator or square root. So did we have that when we started? No. When we finished, did we have it? No. So our domain stayed all real numbers. And that's it. No red lights. We didn't have a square root. We're not dividing by x. So if you don't have either one of those red lights, then we just keep it all real numbers. Any questions about how I work through A? Anybody need more time to copy it down before we move on? All right, so let's look at our second one. So now, this is question B, still on page 9. Let's look at what we have. When I started out, did I have any red lights? No. Does x of t or y of t have a red light? No. So I'm starting off with all real numbers. Okay, so now let's solve it. So I'm going to take my x function, solve that for t. And whenever you take a square root, it is positive or negative. So I'm going to put that plus minus in front. And now step number 2 is substitute that expression. So I'm going to substitute what I got here. And I'm going to put it here. That's all I'm going to do. So I'll have y equals 4, and then I'm going to put that in parentheses. Now, can I distribute this 4 into the square root? No, there is nothing for me to simplify. That is my equation. Now, did my domain remain all real numbers? Nope, because now we have a square root. So when you're finding your domain, you only focus on what's under the square root, not the 4. It's what's under the square root. You set that greater than or equal to 0. Somebody at the door? I didn't hear anything. Oh, you did? Oh. Okay. So now let's solve this. How am I going to solve this for x? Subtract the 5. So we have x is greater than or equal to -5. But we do not put anything in algebraic notation. We need to write that in interval notation. So what we're saying is, for this parametric equation, x is going to start at -5 and go to infinity. This would be my domain. I really feel like this chapter is not hard, but I don't ever want to underestimate it. You know, like I really don't feel like it is. But so far, what do you all think? Because you have a test a week from today. It's your last test before the final. Wow. That's it. Then we're done. It's gonna be May. It's time to go. All right, so now I'm going to do the last question. Now this is the juicy one because it has a lot of stuff going on. So now we're going to do some that are not quite as straightforward. So this is at the bottom of page 9, and this is question C. So notice how I start off with both red lights. I have 2 red lights. So before I start solving for x, solving for t and substituting it in y, I need to figure out what domain am I starting with, okay? So what I know right now, I know that t plus 4 for this equation has to be greater than or equal to 0. And I know that for my y equation, t cannot equal 0. So we have to figure out how to write that. So that means that t has to be greater than or equal to -4, but it cannot be 0. So that's when we have to break our interval into 2 pieces. On the number line, if this is -4 and this is 0, I'm saying that I can start here and I can go here, but when I get there, I need to stop. I have an open circle. So if you look at your second equation, which is your y parameter, notice that we're dividing by t. And there's only 2 red lights. The first red light says you have to take the square root of 0 or a bigger number. And the second red light that you all should know is you cannot divide by 0. It's impossible. So out the gate, we already know that our domain is going to be it's not going to be straightforward. So now I'm just going to leave that graph right there, and I'm going to solve it to see if there's any other restrictions I need to add to my domain. So let's get started. Let's start off with the x parameter. So if x equals the square root of t plus 4, the first thing I'm going to do is square both sides. That gets rid of the square root. And then the last thing I'm going to do is what? Subtract the 4. So this is where I am, right here. So now, we're going to take what we came up with, which is x squared minus 4. And we're going to put it here. So my final equation, this is my parametric equation, is going to be 1 over x squared minus 4. Okay, but now we have another restriction though. Because so now we got something else in our denominator that we got to think about. So let's take that and set that equal to 0. Go ahead and solve that for x. Because after we did our substitution, now we have x squared minus 4 in our denominator. So when you solve this, you get x squared equals 4. And what is the square root of 4? And plus and minus 2. So now I need to go back to this graph that my little number line. I need to add 2 more things to it. Cannot be -2, so I'm going to put that here. That has an open circle. And it cannot be +2. So this domain has become pretty spicy. So let's go ahead. I'm going to rewrite that. So I know it can be -4, so that gets a closed circle. But it cannot be -2, it cannot be 0, and it cannot be +2. So now I need to write that in interval notation. In order to do that, I have to write 1, 2, 3, 4. I have 4 different things that's going on. Let me zoom in first. Let me zoom in really close. So my domain, if we go with the first section, I have a bracket -4, and then I travel to -2. I put a parentheses there. That's all. I can't even go that far. When I get to -2, I got a red light. Got to stop. Yes.
How did you get it to 2 again?
So going back to this parameter, after you did your substitution, when I substituted my x, when I solve for t and I substitute that into this equation, I set it equal to 0. If you take the square root, so I added 4, and then I took the square root. And the square root of 4 is +2 and -2. Does that make sense? All right, so now let's go ahead and go to the next piece. So that's our first piece. So union. So now I'm picking up at -2. Hi. I'm picking up at -2 and I'm traveling to 0 and I'm stopping. Now both of those get a parentheses because it cannot equal either one of those. And then what do you think my next one is going to be? Union what? 0 to 2. Still got parentheses. And then lastly, 2 to infinity. It is. That's it. That's a spicy one. So let me go ahead and write it all together. So my equation is 1 over x squared. Well, let me write y equals 1 over x squared minus 4. And the domain for this equation is above it. All right, any questions about that? Okay, we got one more for today and then we'll end there. We're gonna end kind of early to give you a chance to work on your homework. Homework 19, you should be able to do the entire front side of homework 19. All right, so, oops, sorry. I forgot it was on the same page. Okay. So let me clear this out. And then we're going to do one last one. So let's look at what we got. So starting out, do I have a domain of all real numbers? Am I starting with a domain of all real numbers? let's look at what we got here. We got a lot going on. So in my denominator, I have the square root of t. So let's figure out what that means. So that means that t has to be greater than 0, but because it's in the denominator, it can't equal 0. So my first domain is that t has to be greater than 0. Now, normally a square root, we would say it has to be greater than or equal to 0. But this time it's in the denominator, so we have to take off that equal. So that's my first domain. And then I have this one here that says t cannot be 0. Now, we kind of already said that with this first one. We established that t can't be 0. So these are, so far right now, on my number line, I'm at 0, but I have an open circle and I'm going to the right. That's where I am. Ooh, why did I say open circle and then put a closed circle? Then I have an open circle and I'm going to the right. So far, right now, that's my domain. Yes.
What made you know that t couldn't equal 0 for the y equation?
So do you have a t in the denominator? So the denominator cannot equal 0.
Okay.
It cannot equal 0. Like if you pick up your calculator and you say 5 divided by 0, it's going to tell you that you can't do it. It's impossible. Nobody can do that. Can't be done. So that's how I knew that. And the square root, I want to make sure we're understanding this because we're at the end. The square root normally would be greater than or equal to 0. But why did I take the equal sign off? Because it's in the denominator. Now, if I flip this and I had that upstairs in the numerator, then I would keep the equal sign. All right, so that's where we are. So now let's start solving and writing our equation. So I'm going to take my x equation, and then I have to solve this for t. So how would you solve this for t? What would you do first? Divide by 1?
Can you do that or no?
You could, but that's like adding 0. That's not going to do anything. Multiply by what? Okay, I got an idea. I can see we're confused. Let me back it up. Okay. I think if I do it like this, if I put that denominator there, then you'll know that it's a proportion. Maybe. Does that help you all see what to do first? Because it's a proportion. So I'm going to cross multiply both sides. I'm going to cross multiply. So when I multiply this direction, I have x times the square root of t equals 1 times 1, which is 1. Okay, now, remember, I'm trying to solve for t, so what am I doing next? Well, you can't subtract it because they're being multiplied. Remember, we said we multiplied these together. So these are attached with the multiplication symbol. So how do I get rid of the x? Divide it, because do you agree that division is the opposite of multiplication? So we're going to divide both sides by x. So now I'm down to the square root of t equals 1 over x. All right, I'm almost there. Now what do I have to do? Square it. And when you square something, you square everything. Everything gets squared. So t equals 1 squared over x squared. So that's my t value. So now we have to take that and put it into our y equation. So I'm going to take that t, that 1 over x squared, and notice that in your y parameter, t is in 2 places. I have to put that in both places. So let's do that. So when I substitute it in, I have y equals, okay, so then I have a 1 over x squared that goes here, and I have a 1 over x squared that goes here. Now, if you got to here, I'll be like, that's pretty good. You know, I'm going to give you just about all your points. Just about all of them. But you need to recognize that this is by far not simplified. Like, this is not simplified at all. So we have to simplify this. So we're kind of, I don't know if you all remember when we had to do this in chapter 7 and 8, or chapter 7, when we had to add fractions. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to rewrite this. How do you think if I need a common denominator, how would I rewrite one? X squared over x squared. Do you agree that x squared divided by x squared is 1? And do you remember that in order to add fractions, you have to have a common denominator? So now I'm in a simplification process. I have my equation. It's just rough. It's rough. We gotta simplify it. So when I do that, I'm going to write this as y equals, and then I still have my 1 over x squared here, and then my plus sign, and I'm going to write that 1 is x squared over x squared. Now I have a common denominator, so I can bring them together. So I have y equals so in my numerator, I have 1 plus x squared over x squared. And in my denominator, I have 1 over x squared. Okay, so now we're dividing two fractions. How do you divide two fractions? I'm almost scared to ask this question. I'm a little bit, can you tell I'm scared? I'm a little bit scared. I'm sorry. I don't mean to show my fear. Okay. How do you divide two fractions? Keep, change, flip. So let's do it. So y equals. So I'm going to keep my numerator. It's 1 plus x squared over x squared. Multiply it by x squared over 1. And then, what's going to cancel out? Yeah, they go away. Wow. So my equation, when it's simplified, is really just 1 plus x squared. So now I have simplified my equation. This is my equation. Now, does this equation present us with any additional red lights? So what you see boxed in red, does it have a red light? Does it have a square root? Nope, and we're not dividing by x anymore. So my domain that I started off writing over here still holds true. My domain is simply x has to be greater than 0. So I'm sorry, I'm zooming out and zooming back in, but the domain is that x has to be greater than 0. And how do you write that in interval notation? Parentheses 0 to infinity. And that would be your domain. We already did the graph yesterday, see? So we're done. And when we come back Monday, then we'll hit these equations at the back. Lord, I'm scared. I'm just scared. I don't know why I'm scared though.